Well, thank you so much for coming on a Saturday, especially. This is our panel discussion for Identificar, our Latinx alumni exhibition featuring over 100 artworks from over, I believe, 100 artists. Lali would know this. 103? 103.
I don't know. Wow.
Yeah, it has been a phenomenal project, and there's been a huge team of people involved, some of whom are here, actually. So I'm just going to begin with our introductions. Our first, and I'm doing it in alphabetical order, and they're not seated in alphabetical order, but you can raise your hand when I say your name. First is Erron Estrada. He actually created our IdentificarX publication with Ramon. It's really lovely, and it was a real labor of love, I'm sure, and we thank you so much for putting the time into it.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so please, we have extra copies you can take a look at. But Erron is a Los Angeles native and graphic designer of indigenous Mexican American descent. His passion is to express facets of cultural identities through lettering, typography, and calligraphy. And Erron said growing up in Los Angeles, he was deeply influenced by his heritage, Chicano culture, and the subcultures that followed, which inform his work today. Being immersed in the culturally diverse communities of LA, he learned how to communicate with other ethnic groups, and interestingly, he said, including his own, which I'd like to unpack today. Erron said visual language was a way to understand the world around him, even if he didn't speak the language. He could communicate through written forms like graffiti that could always be translated into a language he understood. As a graphic designer, Erron views language as a tool in assisting our vernacular to create visibility rather than something that necessarily defines identity. Very interesting things. I'm excited to talk about that. Okay, so Stella Hernandez is the Associate Chair for Undergraduate Spatial Experience Design and has taught at ArtCenter for over 8 years. She received her first degree in industrial design and worked for different companies within the furniture and hospitality design fields in South America. After moving to California and graduating with honors from environmental design at ArtCenter, she worked for prominent interior design firms, contributing to many high-profile luxury residential projects, from interior architecture design to furniture, lighting, and finishing details. As a faculty member, one of the most rewarding experiences for Stella have been with Design Matters courses, where she has gone with other faculty members to South America and brought ArtCenter students from different departments to collaborate in social innovation projects. It is one of the students' most memorable experiences in their time at ArtCenter, because they get to better understand another culture through immersion, learn to collaborate, and get to work on projects that create positive effects in people's lives. Through the Design Matters program, Stella's own Safe Agua system designed for informal communities in Latin America is part of the permanent collection at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum in New York. And Bibs Moreno, and Bibs, is that the name that you always got? I saw a different name on some of the other things.
It's not my government name, but that's my.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
That's my working name, family name.
Bibs is a Chicana artist based out of Los Angeles, originally from the Inland Empire. She grew up in a household of mixed generations. Her approach to photography was influenced in part by her childhood of growing up in her grandmother's house among many of her extended family members, cousins, aunts, and uncles. Bibs often wrote, recorded, and documented her life, whether through photographs or diary entries, to help her navigate and cope with the turmoil in her childhood. She finds that impulse still in her today as a photographer, the need to record and make sure she remembers. She takes pride in her role as an archivist through photography. A vulnerable photographer, her work is part documentary and part cinematic. And Nery Gabriel Lemus, contemporary artist, is an LA native whose work examines issues of stereotype and immigration to problems in society that can lead to the failure of families, such as poverty, abuse, and neglect. Nery received his BFA at ArtCenter and his MFA at CalArts, and is currently on faculty at USC and is the director of the Graduate Fine Art program at Azusa Pacific University.
Cool.
He has had multiple solo exhibitions, including the Charlie James Gallery and Steve Turner Contemporary in Los Angeles. Nery has an extensive exhibition history which is why I actually just focused on LA for us, because it is extensive. So exhibition history with works in group exhibitions at LACMA, the Hammer Museums Made in LA in 2012, California Afro-American Museum, the Armory Center for the Arts, and Orange County Center for Contemporary Art. Nery is a recipient of the California Community Foundation Fellowship, a COLA Fellowship grant from the Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Rima Hort Mann Foundation Fellowship Award. And he is represented by Charlie James Gallery in Los Angeles. What's really fantastic about our panelists today is that they actually give you the full picture in many ways of being a student to becoming an active, creative person in their field. Because with Erron and Bibs, they are more recent graduates and who we would probably categorize as emerging into their fields. And then with Stella and Nery, they are established in their careers. They have graduated quite a while ago. And as you can see, they're both faculty. And so they are actually teaching artists, young artists coming up. So I thought it's a wonderful panel in that regard. And so one thing I thought we can do to kind of talk about this journey is maybe have each of you talk about maybe one of the works in relationship to how you made this transition from student to becoming the, a person professional working in your field. And also like maybe some of the ways in which ArtCenter and your experience here coupled with your own background experiences and between like your identity and also just experiencing culture has informed your practice. So I have this on loop, but what I can do is pull up your works if there's any specific one that you wanted to show us.
The Albuquerque poster is the one in the show.
Okay, so which one would you like us to look at first? Just like one of the works.
Yeah, so this one was actually done here as a student. This one is more a professional Albuquerque poster.
This piece?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to, I know that we were just talking prior to the start of this, and I thought it was really fascinating how you use calligraphy in your work.
Right.
And you were talking about how you actually do hand calligraphy.
Yeah, so everything is always done by hand, always drawn out with pencil on paper, and then taken into the digital realm, through Illustrator. And that's something kind of I've learned through ArtCenter teachings as well. Yeah, so this piece was actually more of my freelance graphic design career for Albuquerque Film and Music Experience. And so they wanted a film poster to go with their show. And I was able to get, connections from ArtCenter actually, which helped me get this project. And through them, I was able to, connect with them and give them what they wanted, I just wanted to be unapologetically me and do my thing, with the lettering. And that's how this came, they approached me and were like, we like your work. And so I was like, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to put out there. And they really enjoyed that piece too.
And is the calligraphy something that you devised? Like, is this a style that you created?
Yeah. So, I've been influenced by, Victorian style lettering, black letter, through calligraphy of all sorts, Arabic, Japanese calligraphy. And so I create my own style of lettering, like this one too. This was done in an advanced lettering type class here at ArtCenter with Niels Lindstrom. And yeah, it just, developed over time. From a young age, I was doing graffiti art. That's how it started. But it really blossomed after I came to ArtCenter and really developed through that process.
Okay, and then we'll come back to some of the other questions I had, but let's move on to Stella.
Thank you.
These two pieces are actually on view downstairs, but you want to talk about this a little?
Yes. Well, I think rather than talking about just one piece, I would like to talk about my own process during my career, because I think some of this work represent what I did before, and some represent the direction that I'm moving right now. And I started my career before ArtCenter So I work in South America, in Colombia and South America, in different furniture companies after I studied industrial design there. That was one type of experience. It was following whatever I was directed to do. And that was the type of work that I was doing there. So it wasn't so much about showing my own initiatives. It was more about following the work of other people or the direction of other people. After I came to ArtCenter and I got my degree in environmental design, I think I felt different, and I think the education at ArtCenter empowered me to have more of my own voice. I felt more like superhero when I got out of ArtCenter, like I can do so much. And that's part of the education that we get, because it's a very high quality education, and
Right.
you really feel that you got so much tools that now you can be on your own doing great things.
Right.
So I felt that empowerment. I work for different clients in LA area and different designers, and I could start having a little bit more of my voice. And I think this piece is a good one. This is the tango table, where it started as something different. I was working with an interior designer, and we wanted to make these tables that will go together somehow, nesting or some other expected way. And I took it in a more unexpected way. And it's part of my love of dancing. I love dancing. And so it came from that passion. So this is work that I did collaborating with or working for other designers and clients. But now I'm taking a new direction. And I think it's on the lines of that level of empowerment that I'm having. So now I feel that I can express myself in a different way, with things that are more authentic to myself. And that's the type of work that I'm doing now, and those are the pieces that you can see downstairs. And this relates to my origin, the place where I was born. They refer to Colombia, refer to materials and craft techniques from Colombia, and I wanna elevate them. I've been working for a long time in luxury, developing like luxury spaces and luxury objects. And for me, it's defined right now a little bit, trying to fight the preconception that we have of luxury, and trying to bring elements from another culture that could be also defined as a new luxury. That's what I'm into right now.
Yeah, and I wanted to, well, after we get through everything, I wanted to unpack some of that, this idea of a new luxury.
But
But
beautiful, beautiful work.
I know,
Yeah.
I really love the tango tables. They're
Yeah.
so
I gotta
funny.
get one. We'll talk later.
Okay, so Nery, if you'd like to
Yeah, what do you
tell
want
us
me
a
to
little
do?
bit. Talk about your work a little bit, and in terms of like how you arrived at this kind of work, but also how your art center experience has, and we won't talk about CalArts, but how your art center experience has informed your practice.
Okay. Yeah, so came here in 2000, graduated in 2007. I would say the experience I had here at ArtCenter, I was in the fine art program, and I was taking classes with illustration students at the same time, so I got all the basic, technical skills, but it was very conceptually, based as far as the practice when I was in school. I would still do figuration, but that was a component that was here, which, since I had a lot of figuration background, it was okay, and I think it was actually good. So when I did go to CalArts, that translated really well, because I had that background there, as opposed to if I would have gone to a school that was mostly just figurative based, so that's one of my experiences here. This body of work, which is a show that I just had this past February, March, they're actually watercolors. So
which is kind of,
Oh, wow.
when you get close to them, you realize like they're not framed. I developed this process where they look very photorealistic. I'm really attracted to watercolor because if you think about paint, acrylic painting tends to have more of a plasticky feeling. Oil painting is more like this buttery feeling. And watercolor seeps into the paper like a stain, which is quite beautiful. I really enjoyed that process. And it's, for me, it stemmed through these sort of like new world explorations, you know, when people, when colonizers will come and they'll bring their artists to document the new world, they will use these sort of ways of documenting the world. And it's something I wanted to sort of take back in a sense. And this body of work, this show is called The Poetics of Place, based on Gaston Bachelard's, you know, The Poetics of Space. And so I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about an essay by Tomás Ibarra Frausto called Rascuachismo, a new aesthetic, which for me, thinking about the idea of the interior space and also the concept of Rascuachismo, an aesthetic that comes out of a need, that comes out of necessity. So like in this one, you see a 5-gallon jug that has succulents growing out of it. 2 of them that are on top of each other. It's the one that's in the show. And so this is, again, referring to the home, things you find in the home. And then the other piece, you have a pre-Columbian figure giving birth, and a Guatemalan textile. You know, that's my background. And the idea there is being that the womb is the first home. So birthing, you know, coming, that was like a centerpiece that informed the rest of the exhibition, dealing with interior spaces, but very culturally specific as well.
Okay, and I'm so glad you brought up Rascuache. I wanted to bring that up later, so thank you so much for bringing it up. It's a nice transition. Okay, so Bibs, can you tell us a little bit about some of the works that you're doing?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with just my experience here at ArtCenter and being a student, and how now I feel like it's different as I'm working. But when I first entered ArtCenter, I feel I came with like a very naive approach. I did not have a lot of formal training beforehand, and I had heard ArtCenter was a lot of, you know, you don't come here as like fresh-eyed. Usually people come here and they have experience and they're pretty established, or they already know what they're doing when they come here. So I felt that I came here pretty naive and technical experience. Not that I didn't know anything, but I definitely had a lot to learn. But I did have like a very strong voice, and my photography before was very like raw and emotion, like full of emotions. And so I wanted to come here for the same reason that you mentioned. Just it's a very technical school. Like, you know, you don't necessarily come here, I guess, as a photographer always necessarily. I have seen it, but you don't necessarily come here to be more like a conceptual at least in my like interpretation of coming here when I saw in the student gallery. So I was a bit afraid of coming here. I didn't want to come out looking like a art center student photographer.
Same.
And no diss against like that, but there was like a very like
specific look.
Like, oh yeah, of course you went to art center, and that was something I was very afraid of.
Same here.
Yeah, you're really afraid of, because you want to have your own voice and you don't want to feel like you're just a carbon copy. So yeah, I guess that was just like my struggle coming here, was having a very strong eye, strong voice, but it being very feral, I guess, and not like tamed and fine-tuned. And like coming here was I had to learn how to be more disciplined, how to pump out things quickly, you know, learning how to be a lot more perfect and a lot less messy, because I was very messy before in my approach. But now I feel like leaving ArtCenter, I was a little too prim and proper, and now I've learned to just combine the two. And so I have my voice that I didn't lose, and I'm glad I didn't lose it, because that was something I was very afraid of, just becoming just too industrial, or too like not, there's no heart there. And I feel like I'm getting to this point now where like I'm able to bring both together.
Can you talk a little bit about, and I think Erron, you kind of talked about this too, is like this idea of losing your voice during the educational process. What do you mean by that? Like, what was the thing that made you feel like that?
You know, I would take like, I mean, there's a lot of things, I guess. One aspect is just, you're shown a lot of work. And of course, you're going to try to, this is what is shown to you. Like, this is what is deemed good work. And this institution deems this as like good work. So you're going to start, like, even if it's subconsciously, you're going to start trying to imitate it to some degree, or aim to make your work look closer to that. You know, the examples that was being shown were very specific looks. So I was afraid of becoming that. Also, we're using the same tools. Everyone's using the same, like, if you're renting from the equipment room, or we're using the same seamlesses, then it's easy for everyone to kind of start looking similar. There's also an aspect of just, when I came here, I feel like I was definitely more a little punk rocker. So, you know, I came with like very dirty, like I liked pushing my film a lot. I liked my film being scratched. I liked a lot of things that just to make it look gritty. And, you know, my teachers were like, no, this is not gallery ready. Like, no, you cannot be doing this. I mean, if you've taken, I don't think anyone's voting here, but Pete's class, that was just, I don't know, it was like intense. The matte cuts having to be perfect. Just, yeah, you know, being gallery ready. And so there is an aspect of like, and it's good. I mean, I'm glad I did learn how to, because if I want to present in a pristine manner, I can now, you know, but also it's like, sometimes you want it to be a little gritty. You want that grunge. Yeah, you want, it's, you know, it varies depending on what you're working on. So there is like a level of like expectation and standards here that can almost drown out your voice if you don't have a strong voice to begin with, I think.
Right. Can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
Because you know, it brought like what you were saying about coming in here and not wanting to get lost in this sort of aesthetic. You know, I honestly, I mean, I'm gonna let you guys get your money's worth, because you know, it's I'm just honest about my experience, and I've been vocal about this. But you know, when I came here, you know, there's no one that looked like me as far as faculty. And to me, you know, and when the classes started, the curriculum that was being taught, there was in the slideshows, they had slides back then. I didn't see artists that I could really relate to that were dealing with identity. And several of my professors were sort of pushing me away from doing identity-based work. Particularly because, you know, whether they said it or not, it's like, oh, that was, you know, identity politics was a thing of the 90s. And I'm like, no, you know, that's my life. It's not the 90s, it's what I live. We don't go through these trends, it's our own experiences, right? So for me, those are the sort of things that I just kept on pushing, and I would get into arguments, discussions with my faculty. At the end, the department chair told me, I'm glad that you didn't change who you were, but you just took what we gave you and brought what you came with and made your own thing, you know? And I think that's, I don't know how it is now with, you know, student experiences, you know, you just came up, she's smirking.
I mean, I was recent. I did feel very isolated in that the only people that I saw reflected in me worked as security, as in the cafeteria, or janitors.
You guys should have joined the graphics department, man. We were stronger there.
Is that
I mean,
right?
photo was more diverse, but in terms of student base, there was more Latinos there, But I mean, in terms of like teachers and staff, no. That was very isolating too, for sure. And having to like being shown work that was very white based, and just being like, even if you show me women, I don't care. Like, I mean, women artists are cool, but also I'm just like, can you show me black and brown artists? Because like this is very just like, I can't relate to this.
For sure.
Yeah.
Art Center definitely had their curriculum, you know, and the Western philosophy of that. And what I try to do was kind of bring in my own heritage, you know, growing up, not really speaking Spanish, but knowing my indigenous heritage was something that I really wanted to incorporate into my work. You can see it in some of this, you know, the rug, the Olmec rug. So that was all based off, you know, Nahuatl language, indigenous to Mexico. Something that I, you know, taken liberty to even just learn a portion of that language. I rather, you know, speak on that language than even Spanish. So like, it's been controversial for me to even speak about some of this stuff. But
Why is that?
well, it's just kind of, you get to a point where you're like, do I identify as this? Do I identify as that? And like the whole time you were always this. You were always, a descendant of Mexican people of that heritage. We do. I do have Spanish heritage as well. So, that shows in my work too. Regardless, like even if it's subconsciously, it pours out into my work, and that's what I show.
One thing go ahead,
Yeah.
Stella, we're going to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something. It's so interesting for me to hear these stories and what happened when you came to ArtCenter. I think for me it's a little different, and I go back many years in my professional practice. And at this point, and I mentioned this in the opening of the exhibition, at this point is half of my life I live in Colombia and half of my life I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
So I was back in Colombia, I was doing design work. I wasn't totally happy because I couldn't do the type of work that I wanted. Everything was very different. So for me, was visualizing coming to United States was the dream. Everything seemed like perfect, right? So I was leaving behind something that I was not happy with, and I was coming to the United States. So ArtCenter became also like part of that dream.
Right.
So I actually wanted to do what ArtCenter was producing,
Yeah.
because that was what it looked for me the ideal of design, right? So I wanted to follow those stereotypes of Western design. And like I wanted to be part of that, right? And that was good, and that was the learning, and I learned how to do it, and I work doing that. And now it's the opposite, right? And I think everything aligns on my own story and my own life, and how we are at different points in every different stage of your life. Now I'm going back, right? And now I'm appreciating what I left. Now I understand how these stereotypes were not probably the ideal, and how I'm accepting to hear different narratives, right? That's what this exhibition is about, is opening your eyes to see different narratives. And we are now opening to that, and new generations have a very different perspective.
Right.
Now I look back and I'm glad that I have 2 nationalities and that I can actually go back. Like, it's not anymore the ideal place. I also see Colombia back as a place with a lot of richness and other positive things that I didn't see before.
Right.
And that's why my work is actually reflecting that. It's all that trajectory.
I love that.
But I think what's interesting is, and I think just commenting on what you're talking about, it's like you almost needed to have that experience of, the standard of the industry is a specific kind of design style. And oftentimes it's connected to the shadow of the Bauhaus, right? And it sounds like, and this is where to me the division is, or like the early, like you guys are in your early stages and you're still unpacking so much of like your identity and your experience, and how does that fit into the work, and how does that end up feeding your work into like turning it into having clients. And then with Stella, you went through that entire thing, and having done it and then having taught, it gave you this perspective of how you can now, in a very, I would say, high level, inform your practice, not in a reactionary way, but in an informed way. And in some ways, I feel like you need that age and that distance to get there. I feel like that with your work too, Nery, because I mean, when we first met, and not that these are not like strong works, but I met you when you were making those rug pieces that were commemorating people who have died crossing over, right? Which is really strong, conceptually very laden with so many different kinds of narratives. And then now, I was so surprised when you decided to go back into figuration, and specifically with watercolor, but the things that you choose to use in there is, again, a certain kind of sophistication in the way you're actually talking about or integrating your identity into the work. And I would even say, like, you and I are very well versed with what kind of what was called identity art in the 90s. And I feel like you're not doing that what was considered as that at that time. I feel like maybe, and I don't know, I'm curious to hear what you all think about it, but it seems to me like the works that you're all doing, and I feel like in a lot of the pieces in this show, it integrates in a more thoughtful and maybe more complicated way what we would consider as an expression of our identities. And I think part of that is because we all acknowledge, and like you, Erron, talking about how the fact that the way you understand your heritage identity isn't specifically just Mexican,
Right.
or the fact that you might not understand the language, but you are okay with knowing and identifying yourself in specific ways.
Or just kind of learning the language.
There's a complicatedness in the way that you're all making work. And I think that, to me, what was so impressive about the show is, as a whole, we're really being able to see that. And it elevates this conversation for us as curators to acknowledge that, like, how are we going to do a show that's just all identity based? But even that doesn't hold together for this show, because everybody's work is so different.
Right.
So I really appreciated that. And so given that, I wanted to talk about, one thing I did want to ask is, like, we have two academicians and we have two former students. How do you then, Bibs is talking about voice and the fear of losing voice and the inability to express one's voice in an academic environment. Do you think about that when you're teaching, and how do you foster it then?
That's a good question.
Most definitely. As a director, I look at my teacher's curriculum and I see if there's diversity in their curriculum. I really make a conscious effort. I say, like, it's like that. I need to see if you're presenting artists or readings, it needs to be diverse. It needs to be, have diverse voices. So I think that that's very important to me. For me, as an educator, it's like I never want to change where a person's coming from. If you're into horses, guess what? You're going to be doing a bunch of horses. You're going to be doing the best horses that you can make. You know what I mean? I'm not, and that's the thing. I would get like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Now it's like, no, I wouldn't.
I've got that.
Yeah,
I've got that before.
I was like, no, man, let's do it. If you're going to be doing work that deals with identity or using some of these symbols, then I'm going to be like, okay, then let's look at the trajectory of art. Then let's look at what other artists have done with this and what you could add to this conversation, and not just use it because it's, iconic, another virgin, another, Aztec warrior, another nopal or whatever. It's like, how can we add to this conversation? So I'm always discussing with our students about that. But I think the curriculum is very important. It all stems in that. And for me, as I have the power to hire, I look at that, and particularly being that majority of the schools I've taught in, my students are female. You go to most art schools, it's majority female. Right. And sometimes the faculty doesn't reflect that. You know what I mean?
I'd be the only male in the class sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
At ArtCenter?
Here at ArtCenter,
The graphic design? Oh, interesting. That's not photo.
It wasn't like that in photo?
It's opposite?
Photo was close to 50-50, but a lot of times there's a lot of men. Yeah, a lot of men.
But I completely relate to you because I taught for many years too, but I was always in the contemporary art side. But how do you do that in the design side? Like, how do you, Stella, actually build a curriculum that has a diverse body of knowledge when we well know, like, the international style and the Bauhaus is like such a huge, casts a huge shadow.
Yeah, it casts a big shadow, but it's definitely not the only example that you can bring to the classroom.
Right.
So I think I have thought about this a lot for the last years. And I think first, just having a different presence in the classroom, just the fact that I'm a Latina woman and I'm in front of the classroom as a teacher makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I bring different narratives, like I can talk about my work and it's a different narrative than the other people, that brings the conversation and that brings appreciation for any other culture, right? It's not, with talking about myself, I don't want my students to only appreciate Latin American culture. Just by talking about another perspective, I want them to appreciate everyone's perspective. So presence definitely makes a difference, having different diversity in the classroom. Bringing examples of work, and this is not something that every faculty member does, and I will say many people are still hanging into the same Italian design or other type of design as the perfect design. But I try to bring other examples. I try to bring examples from all around the world and different perspectives. I think that's the only way to do it in design, is really opening and showing to the students, like, there are different paths.
Different
there
point
are
of
different
views.
stories. And this could be your own story. And I'm excited now because I'm now in a different position, not only as a faculty, but as an associate chair. So the idea of being able to influence changes in the curriculum, it is very exciting for me.
That's awesome.
Well, and you talked about, and you touched on this in previous conversations, is this idea of a stereotype of design. And I thought that was a really interesting phrasing because, as we well know, oftentimes when somebody says international artist or international design, it can either erase like native or indigenous references, or it can only refer to European-based standards. So when you say stereotypes of design, what do you mean by that, and how are you countering that as a designer but also as a teacher?
Wow. Well, I think as I was explaining my own stories, I have worked with clients and with other designers that definitely are keeping the course into certain style and certain preconception of, for example, what luxury is. I remember working for different clients who said, I love your design, it's amazing, but put some brass somewhere, because other way we are not gonna sell it at the price that we want to sell it, right? So that's a little detail, but it's part of those conceptions that that's luxury, right? That's how it should be defined. And I brought a student the other day to the gallery, and she was looking at my pieces, and she asked me that question: is this considered luxury? So I thought it was so interesting. Like, well, let's define luxury. What is luxury? If luxury is about a piece that has a lot of dedication, a lot of intricate work, a lot of hours that somebody has spent doing this, and aesthetically is very pleasant, yes, this is a luxury piece. That's how we are defining, right? Because that's how this was made, right? Hours of somebody, and the artisan picture is right there, making these details. So that's what I'm trying to do with fighting these stereotypes of design. And I think it's difficult in the classroom because you need to have also a wide view in the classroom and not only show your perspective. I think it needs to be very wide. I need to show this and that in order for the students to understand and take their own opinion, form their own opinions about design.
How about for you, Bibs and Erron, as people who are working in a client-based industry?
Right.
How do you counter that, or do you face that if you present work that, like for you, Erron, using these kinds of specific kind of calligraphy and graphic design stuff?
I don't think so, because I think people seek me out for that. Like they love the style of lettering I do, whether it's tattoo lettering culture, which is very heavy Latino-based artists in the tattoo culture, or whether it's designing this publication. They seek out, they want that kind of, they want that ethnicity, they want that kind of feel, like, I want it to kind of look indigenous, or throw in some of your, whatever you want to feel that will make the piece. And so usually I tend to approach clients that are interested in my type of work. And so there's not really any like pushback. Well, that's not what I'm looking for. It's too, it's too cultured or something like that. So I don't get too much of that in my line of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like people don't have respect for photography in terms of like pricing. I feel like I think I get pushback in terms of like luxury. I think what you're trying. Oh, I'm hitting the mic. What you're trying to get at in terms of like the mastery it takes to be able to create such a beautiful piece, like the hours, the experience, like that doesn't just the same person can't make that. You obviously are going to make something like way more gorgeous from your experience and your mastery compared to someone that's only been at it for like 5 years. No diss against that person, but like there is something that comes with experience that makes you just like a lot better at your craft. And I do feel that people do seek me out for my specific like post-production retouching style or photography style, but then often don't understand the work that goes into it. Right. And all that, like, I don't just do, like, that didn't just happen overnight. Like, that took years of practice of me, like, doing on other work that didn't come out as cool, but I learned from that experience and I kept doing it, I kept doing it, I kept doing it, I kept doing it. And then I was able to, like, master that technique. And I do find that, I think there's, like, the internet, the ease of being able, like, digital, like, your iPhone being able to take photos, there's kind of a, it's hard sometimes to have. I think people think that you're asking for too much. Like, well, why would you charge that much for? You could just take a picture. It's so easy to take a picture, but it's like it's yeah, anyone could take a picture, but it's.
I used to think that too before I started photographing things on my own. I was like, this is harder than it seems, man.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends what you want. Like, if you want just a plain product photo, yeah, that's right. That's a cheaper price. Clearly, obviously, there's not that much work or there's not as much work that goes into that. But it's just like, when you want a specific luxury, I think like a specific mastery or a specific, very fine-tuned style, like, I don't know. I'm not saying like nobody appreciates that, but I do find that like a little bit, there's like kind of culturally, kind of like societally, there's kind of,
especially because everybody has a camera.
Everyone has a camera.
I know.
So I think it's kind of like it kind of like
everyone thinks they're a photographer.
Yeah, right. I think it kind of hurts a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm misseeing it, but I don't know.
Right.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on, and if the way everyone here is talking about the way that they make their work, I think goes back to the term rescache. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I love the word, and in some ways, it really encapsulates, I think, what a lot of people who come from diasporic identities like us actually deal with, which is you have to take and scavenge between multiple cultures that you are simultaneously part of and not part of to make the thing that you're making. And I think that's what's so important, and what's reflected in this exhibition is the kind of new that gets injected into mainstream culture from practitioners such as yourselves, because of the fact that you're able to take things from multiple places because of your unique experiences, being simultaneously part of something and not part of something at the same time. Do you see yourselves as that kind of, like, do you see that in your own practice, or how do you view your work, like in terms of like describing it to people? Is it this kind of
definitely
quilting?
I mean, like, for me as a graphic designer, like I'm taking from other cultures, like the hip hop culture. That was huge for me growing up. Skateboarding culture. I grew up in the 90s, so that has a lot of influence on my work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm part of that culture, but I kind of utilize some of that work. I'm not appropriating another culture. I'm just utilizing it, regurgitating that back out in my own style. That's kind of how I see it. It's like, it's not really like I'm gathering different parts of information from different cultures and using that to create my own, almost like my own aesthetic, my own culture. Yeah.
I feel that. I mean, you asked me a little bit about Frutas, and I think I run a magazine called Frutas. It's
cool.
Not a copy, it's not a carbon copy, but it's like a reinterpretation of Fruits magazines. I don't know if you guys know the Fruits magazines from the 90s. That was a photographer that was documenting the like eclectic, cool subculture styles in Japan. So I did started off as like a one-off. I just was like, let's, like, me and my friends dress really cool, so let's go like to Los Callejones and shoot us, like let's pretend like we're in our version of Japan would be like Santee Alley and shoot our friends like cool styles,
Right.
like
Mhm.
you know, like and we'll call it frutas, so frutas, you know,
Mhm.
and it blew up on accident. I didn't know people really resonated with that. I didn't think anyone was going to really like it, and it made me then start questioning like, why does this resonate with so many people, and like what niche did I hit? And it just made me realize in terms of just like, I think there's a lot of stereotypes or just like I don't know if I want to say, there is stereotypes for sure. There's stereotypes in the media, and then there's also just like a lot of the same representation of like Mexican American. I'm
Right.
speaking from my experience, Mexican American and like Chicano culture, which is valid. Like those interpretations are valid, but I feel like it's very white centric in terms of like that's what they identify as like, this is what a Mexican looks like to me. So then we're gonna just keep
Right.
doing this is what a Chicano looks like to me. So we're gonna keep doing that over and over and over. And it's like we've been doing this since like the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s.
Mm.
Like, and not to say that that doesn't exist, and then that's not, like I said, that's not valid, but it's also like a lot of us are weeaboos and like we love Dragon Ball Z, we love anime,
yeah.
we love I don't know, we love a lot of like Japanese culture or
Right.
other things. We're nerds,
Right.
we're dweebs, like we're into punk rock, we're into goth, there's all these subcultures that I don't think people even realize
Subcultures,
that like Latinos contribute here in Los Angeles. Like a lot of people come and visit and they're like, there's like a whole goth scene like of Latinos, and it's like it's been this way.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
Ska.
yeah, and Scott, like y'all just don't know because you
Like
just
huge Morrissey fans.
yeah, and Morrissey, like we all love
Mhm.
Morrissey, we love the Strokes, don't even get me started,
Mhm.
like all of that. And I think that like, so Frutas to me made me realize like, oh, this is really important, like because this representation's not there, and like that's why people really resonated with it. And as I've done it more, it's made me like, it's been like very like I get very emotional about it. I cry like over it all the time because people just being really excited to see it and like reaching out, thanking me in terms of just like
It
just
is
being
an
able to
amazing project.
being able to see ourselves and seeing that like there's so much variety, like and it's all valid. Like I'm not gonna like if you know you're second, third gen, you don't speak Spanish, like who cares?
Right.
You just like I even shot in Mexico City, like we're gonna shoot Mexico City too, like we're gonna shoot
Sweet.
in
Oh,
Mexico,
yay.
like
Yeah,
I want to hit all aspects, all of the spectrum, and
Mhm.
like all is valid, and like you know not feeling that you have to be whatever, which like what does that mean? Why can't we just be ourselves?
Right.
Like, why do we have to fit? And obviously there's a tie, like we have a culture that ties us together, and so there's a similarity and like a sharing there, but also we're all so like we're all so different, and we all like don't need to be just put in
Labeled.
a little box.
yeah.
I think that's what I mean, you should check out the website, her website. Will, and I'm so excited you're going to produce more of these, but it was such a brilliant idea because for those of you who don't know about Fruits, it's actually a compendium of photographs of street culture in Japan. But the photos are such a diverse array that really challenges stereotypes of Japanese culture.
Mhm.
True.
So based on that template, Bibs created Frutas. And but what I thought was fascinating about that, again, it goes back to this idea of rascuache. Like you took something from some other kind of cultural format, but understood that it was a platform to create complicated, diverse images. And I thought what was fascinating is Harold Arandia in the documentary talks about how he always tries to make sure to make space for others who are going to come after him. And I felt like the Frutas project is really like that because you provided space on a platform for so many people within your own community. When you see it on the page, it really solidifies the variety and the complexity of how everybody is performing their identity. And I thought it was a really great project for that reason. And I was really bummed that it was sold out. So I'm like really excited that you're going to do more of it. And the fact that you're doing Santee Alley, you know, a
That's
place
sweet.
that oftentimes isn't considered as what, you know, Stella's talking about, luxury. It is, nobody thinks of it as a luxury place, but then to make this publication and then encapsulate it in a, you know, gorgeous packaged, designed way, it changes that space. And I think that's what's so important about this show is that all of you guys are actually showing a reconfiguration of spaces that are oftentimes seen as impoverished into becoming luxury objects.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder too, like where do the like people get their luxury materials from? Do they repurpose it from, you know, like Santee Alley, like fabrics? A lot of fabrics are sold down there too. Like do high-end, you know, luxury brands utilize that for their work too and call it luxury? So it begins, you know, at this bottom at this bottom and then moves its way up. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a reflection, because a part of it too was just like me growing up. Like I was, I grew up in my grandma's house. I did not grow up with any money. I had to steal clothes. I would get some bus money, go to the mall, steal clothes. I would go to the thrift store with the little money that I have to try to be fashiony, like. And I'm not condoning crime, but I'm just saying, as a teenager and being like poor, like, and still trying to fit in and like still have some sort of expression and still like want to be your own version of cool, and like not having the funds and not having access to it, like you figure out a way to do it. Or you go to the swamp meet, or you go to Santee Alley and you make your outfits, or you learn how to sew, or like even if it doesn't look good, you like Mickey Mouse it, like you do it. And so Frutas is that too, kind of like, because you might look at things that are cool, but then also just like, well, I'm gonna take it back and I'm gonna just do my own style, and like because Frutas too is not just, I'm not regurgitating just trends on the internet, like fashion trends on the internet. It's people with their own personal style. So like, it's like a person you would think of, like, when you think of someone with a personal style, you're like, yeah, that person always dresses crazy. Like, and it's not necessarily things you see in magazines or things you see like on the internet. It's just like, they just got their own style. And I find that like, in this way that we're trying to, I'm like trying to like, not necessarily copy, but we're influenced by fashion, but it's out of reach because it's too expensive. And so we do our own version. But then there's also like high-end people, high-end fashion designers are looking to people that are like these trends that are on the streets, or that are from people that are DIY, and then they're taking it. So there's
Tables
kind of
have
like,
turned.
there's this thing going on. And
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that I like with Frutas too, that like, I think needs to be documented.
Stella, did you have something you were going to say?
Well, I lost track of the
sorry.
where the conversation was going. Everything is so interesting, so I'm getting really sucked into the conversation. But I think it's interesting for me to hear about labels, because it's something that as a Latina coming from a farther country, coming from South America, coming to LA, I get labels from Chicano culture, or even other people who consider themselves Latinx or Hispanic will label me.
Right.
And it is very interesting for me. Sometimes it's upsetting. Sometimes I just wanted to understand these different perspectives. So this idea that we are in the same category, that is this big label, is something that I really battle with. And sometimes I even doubt if I should call myself Latina.
Right.
Because that immediately I'm also putting a label on myself. And now that I explained, like half of my life have been here in the United States, what is my identity now then? So it is complex. I think it is complex at this point to explain really what I am. It's here and there, like Rocio's writing. I totally feel like that. Like, it's like half and half, but I don't think that I can anymore define myself as like this person from somewhere else.
It's
because
never
I've been here enough to have a little piece of both places.
Right.
Yeah, I like to call it authentically inauthentic, because we visually signify pointing to other things for other people, no matter what we say about ourselves oftentimes. And you've beautifully segued us into the thing that I want to talk about at our conclusion.
Can I just jump in?
Oh,
real
yes,
quick?
please.
Because I mean, I'll bring you back.
I know.
I'm not gonna gear off too much. But so like when we think about identity, identity is not something that's fixed. It's something that continues to evolve and change as we come in contact with peoples and cultures, right? And so even labels, the creation of artwork. I mean, many artists, particularly people of color, we deal a lot with hybridity, right? And so when we talk about a concept like raspachismo, I think about growing up, low income. My dad needed a place to hang clothes, so he would get a bar of metal, bend it, screw it to the top of the ceiling, and hang his clothes there. And it's not a closet. It's just in the middle of nowhere, you know, in the middle of a living room or what have you, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I grew up with, you know. Those things translate to art as well. You know, there's a sort of like a moment where people talked about assemblage art, you know. You know, we've been doing assemblage art since, you know, whatever, not as art, but out of necessity, you know. And that's where this whole idea of rasguachismo comes in, that it's that aesthetic that comes out of necessity, you know, like, you know, making clothes and, you know, DIY clothes,
Like
right?
Mickey Mousing. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's what I feel
That's
like
another
it's-
word, Mickey Mousing, you know,
Yeah.
making, you know, it's another term that we've used in our community. And even in Spanish, we say, oh, es hizo Mickey Mouse. You know, we use it, you
Interesting.
know.
Which is kind of like DIY. Like,
Yeah,
kind of just like
DIY.
like
yeah.
doing it. I guess
Wow.
yeah, the equivalent DIY.
Yeah, but so anyway, I mean, I think, you know, even when it comes back to labels, bringing you back there, those are, you know, it's so complex, you know, because all labels are problematic. There's not one that's good. They're all trouble. They're all problems, and it's just a lot of times there's no, you know, sort of like autonomy there. It's mostly like labels that have been given, and it's now we got to deal with like the label that was there. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm coming into the conversation, there's a label. Oh, dang, I guess I have to be here. Oh no, maybe I'll go here. Maybe it's like, so I mean, I'm to the point, it's like whatever you want to call yourself, that's
Right.
what you're gonna call yourself. And that's all good, you know.
I think different generations
That
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
deal with their own labels.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
Did-
say
yes,
something
please.
else? Because I think this experience that that I have taken students to South America has been very interesting from one of the points that you were making about how inventive are other cultures or other people in other environments.
Yeah.
It's not a trend, it's something that has been done forever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when we go to South America with other faculty are here and take students, the idea is to co-create. So it's not coming like the experts, right? Which we are kind of trained at ArtCenter, like,
Yeah.
and in the design areas, like, oh, you are the expert to detect a need, and then you have the skills to resolve that need.
Yeah.
You are the experts. And then we come to a place where actually there are experts already that are living situations day by day. And they may know more inventive ways to solve a problem than we can even imagine. So it's really a lesson when we go to these study away programs. It is a lesson for a student to come down a little bit on that idea that I know everything. It's like, okay, let's listen, let's see what other people do, and inform that. Let's work together in a solution, because it's acknowledging and respecting,
For sure.
like that type of knowledge that other people may have.
And I want to say, to extend that, I feel like what you do is you actually challenge them in terms of the kind of words we use, because the students are going in as designers,
right,
but to study artisans. And somehow artisan is always being described as less than the designer. And then you go in there and you say, well, actually, they have knowledge you don't have. It makes them challenge their assumptions of these terms too.
I think so, not in the particular programs that I have been, but I know other faculty who have taken groups of students to study artisans in other countries. And I think it's like, let's appreciate how other people bring materials and techniques. And now that you know that appreciation, you can take and make something beautiful or unique.
I say appreciation, not appropriation.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so going back to then the labels, and we'll end on this, is So Rosia Carlos, a faculty member here, she actually wrote an essay that's in the publication that Erron designed. And the essay is called The Solitude of Latinx. And she says a sentence that I thought was really great, and I think it encapsulates some of what we've been talking about here. She says, I found myself lonely in my understanding of why, as off-putting or even passé at this point as it might be, Latinx must exist. The answer lies in its place between places, languages, and generations. And here she refers to, and she says it, she wrote it in Spanish, but it translates as neither here nor there space. And how artists often capture this sense of isolation that is often illegible to those outside of it. And this, I think, goes back to the Mickey Mousing. Is like the isolation of being neither here nor there, but all at the same, like present in neither here and nor there at the same time. And the inability for any kind of a name to fully encapsulate everybody's individual experiences. And, you know, Nery, you said people should be able to identify how they want to identify. And I've been thinking about this a lot for Asian Americans too, because we have these monolithic terms. The problem is to actually push political gains, we need to use monolithic terms. But at the same time, when we do that, we lose the individuality of our own experiences. So as artists, how do you see yourself balancing stuff like that out?
How do you
I mean, you're all in this show called IdentificarX.
Right.
And everything we had to talk about is always Latinx, Latinx. And then Rosia writes this article that problematizes it. How do you feel about being in a show that has this terminology, but also how do you in your own work like push away or like deal with that push and pull of these terms that I know that you have to deal with when people talk about your work or when you present your work to clients and things like that? How do you navigate that terrain?
Who wants to answer that first?
What happened? No
Big
one wants to answer
question.
that?
Sorry.
I'll start. Let me see. Well, like I said, I think people could call themselves what they want. I do believe that terms, particularly the labels that we've kind of established, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, they're all problematic and they all have their issues, you know. And it's kind of like thinking about the idea of being the same and different at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's like we want to be able to people to understand like that we're human beings. We bleed, we got culture, you know, we have children, we have family, you know, see those commonalities, but also understand that there's specificities to our culture, specificities to each one of us. And they might not be all the same, you know, like here we might talk about ourselves differently, you know, as it deals with identity. But I'm okay being in that space, you know. I'm okay being in a space where we don't have it all figured out, you know what I mean? And that's why being in the show, maybe some people are like, I ain't gonna be in a show that's called that, you know, no way. You know, for me, it's like, listen, you know, I want to be part of the conversation, you know, and even though I still find issues with all terms, I won't specifically point to something. You bring up a good point about this, you know, monolithic, you know, as far as like for other purposes, it's like you know, it's like people want to know, like, it's like it's part of whether it's xenophobia or what you know, whatever, or for political reasons, for census or whatever, to, you know, for you know, resources, to bring resources. It's like, oh, this community, you know, you know, I understand that, you know, and I don't have an answer for it, but I'm okay if that's the direction it's going to go, Latinx, then that's the direction it's going to go, you know. Until somebody comes up with something better, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what Rocio kind of mentions there.
Yeah. I think my experience during this exhibition has been very interesting because I also had the curator experience.
Mm.
So I talked to a lot of the artists and designers in the show. I talked to people who didn't want to be in the show because didn't want to be labeled. I talked to people that said to me, I don't have any of my work is Latinx enough for the exhibition. Like, they felt that it needed to look certain way
That's interesting.
to actually be in the exhibition.
Right.
So it was really, really interesting to hear all these different perspectives. And for me personally, the importance of this exhibition goes beyond the name.
Amen. Yeah.
So for me, it was like, I
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
care.
We
Yeah.
have to break the boundaries
Yeah.
somewhere, Yeah.
It's happening.
Right.
That's what it has to.
Mm.
If it's the terminology and some people, study the name and decided that's okay. It's not maybe my first choice. I don't agree with the X, and that's just my personal view. But I'm gonna be in because I think it's important for the school to acknowledge all this amount of artists and designers that have been in this school and that somehow identify with this terminology in any way, and to put it in the context of a city where almost 50% of the people are actually identify as Latinx. It's huge for this school.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that we haven't done it yet. Like
Yeah.
so I didn't. For me, didn't matter. Right?
Right.
That whatever
Had to
was
be
the
done.
title, the name, like if it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Just real quick. I mean, I appreciate what you said because the importance of the show. I used to teach here too, and talking to students that many of them felt invisible,
Right.
So to bring attention to this is so important,
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, I felt very culturally isolated coming here. I felt like
I'm glad to be a part of it with you guys, man.
yeah. Honor.
Making history.
Yeah, the label thing. I see. Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's complicated. It's I get why humans do that. We need a label. We need to categorize. I think there's like a comfort there in helping us to understand the world, and like we have to put things in categories in order to try to like interpret things. Otherwise, everything's just chaos. So I get the need for terms. But yeah, I could see it being tiring and like, erasing your individuality and feeling that. It makes me sad to hear that you had some people that felt like their work just wasn't
Yeah.
like Latino enough. Just inherently, like if you're just making it, like it doesn't have to hit
Right.
certain topics. I feel like just inherently, just because you made it is already like Latino.
I'm
enough.
guilty of that too, though. Like I felt
there's
like
a
I had to
pressure.
enter some of that,
For sure.
like more of my, my cultural stuff in the exhibit.
For
so.
sure. I feel like I get that. But it also makes me sad to feel like because it is kind of
Right.
erasing your individuality. Like why buy, and I personally feel inherently whatever I make, like regardless, and I do a lot of topics on identity, but even if I don't specifically make something on identity, like it's still gonna be
Mm-hmm.
like I'm Chicana, I'm Latina, it's gonna still be that regardless
Still you.
because it came from my experiences. I'm proud to be Mexican American. I'm proud to be of Mexican descent. I'm proud to be Chicana. So I don't necessarily hate any terms or feel. I get when people bring up why they would feel discomfort with certain terms or labels, but I guess I don't. I'm cool with all of them. I don't really. None of them really like bother me so much. I guess it's just more. What I have issue with is just like feeling this pressure of having to produce art, like we're saying, producing art that would be like deemed worthy enough. And I think that's what Frutas is too for me, is like we could be whatever we want and it's still, our identity is still valid. And like, I don't have to be like, as a Chicana, I don't have to be like in a lowrider or.
So you mean like you feel the pressure to perform?
Yeah,
the
performing
assumptions of the
something so that
identity.
people are like, she's totally Chicana. Yes, like my identity is valid. Like,
Valid, yeah.
Yeah,
Validated.
and having to
Right.
like, I think that's where I assert my individuality, but also still feel like I'm proud to be to share this culture and be part of this bigger group. I'm super proud to be Chicana. So.
Erron, did you feel pressure when you were making the publication?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I didn't necessarily agree on the name either. Like, with the X involved, as Stella was saying, I don't I know for a lot of indigenous communities, the X is like a CH or an SH sounding letter form. So it didn't really make sense to me. But from my point of view, I don't identify as being a Mexican American artist or an indigenous artist. I'm just an artist first and foremost. That's how I see it. So again, breaking these boundaries of labels and categorizing us in these boxes is something that I stray away from, because I'm like, no, like my work is universal. It's for everybody. It might be exclusive to a certain community, but it's in the end, it's universal. We're all humans. So whoever enjoys it, the better for it.
Well, especially with something like graphic design, because that kind of permeates everywhere and anywhere
Right.
in the world.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, so like doing things for clients that has nothing to do with my culture, and I'm totally fine doing that kind of work, because sometimes I do like to get outside my comfort zone, doing something that is not more personal to me, but maybe personal to the client, and that's interesting because I'm learning about their culture in that aspect, and I'm researching their way of life and how they all connect with each other, how we all connect as humans. Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience at this point? We're down to the last 10. Do you all have questions for each other at all?
I do. I have a question. Sorry, just because you were talking about the label, but I'm curious, like, did you feel Latina while you grew up in Colombia, or is Latina a concept that is you being here in the United States now because we are the different thing compared to like white Americans?
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't think I felt the same way when I was living in Latin America. And it's interesting for me to come to United States and knowing that I'm a person of color here, but I was never a person of color in Colombia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? And I was kind of surprised when I found out here. It's like, oh, really? That's how you define it. So that for me tells me a lot, right?
Yeah.
about that experience. But definitely no, like coming to United States comes also with a lot of this baggage and labels and so on that I didn't experience before. And also I came to United States more than 20 years ago. It was different also. Now we have very different discussions that we never had before. And so my perspectives also have changed a lot.
The only thing I would say, if I may, is that even in Latin American countries, there's still colorism. You know what I mean? So we might not say like people of color, but there is colorism. Growing up, being a Chapín, it's like, ese se mira indio. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And oh, how beautiful! Look how white and blue, clear eyes she has. These are the things that we're here in our own Latin American countries.
Right.
So the colorism exists. Even with sort of the TVs and media, who was on the covers, more light-skinned, Guatemalans or light-skinned Colombians. You know what I mean? These are sort of the things that still exist, despite the U.S. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. It's part of colonization. You know what I mean? So,
well, I was considered like the white boy growing up, because all my friends spoke Spanish. I was the only pocho out of the bunch who didn't speak Spanish. So to navigate through that was difficult for me, because I was trying to find out who I was. Even though I knew I was a Mexican descent. My last name is in Spanish, but I didn't speak it. So it was definitely a struggle for me to understand that, like, colorism. Because we don't necessarily experience that as young children. I didn't, at least. I don't speak for every Latino, but I didn't really get into, like he was talking about, colorism until like high school. After high school, that's when I really started to
call you güero?
Yeah. Güero culero. Yeah.
No.
Well, this would be a good place to end it, unless anybody has any. Because we're now entering into the intricacies of our own hierarchies within our own community, that's a whole other show we don't have. But thank you so much for sharing and providing insight into your own experiences.